Billionaire's sister spilled wine on black CEO. Seconds later, her family's empire collapsed. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Get out of here. You don't belong at this table. The words sliced through the ballroom like broken glass. Laughter stopped. Forks froze midair. And in that stillness, the wine fell a sharp, golden stream, pouring over a white silk dress. Danielle Rhodes didn't move. Not an inch. The liquid ran down her face, cold as the room that suddenly forgot how to breathe. Across from her, Emily Stonewell, blonde, flawless, every inch of privilege, stood trembling with the kind of rage that only comes from fear disguised as confidence. For 3 full seconds, no one said a word. Then someone near the back whispered, "Is this part of the program?" It wasn't. This was humiliation, raw and deliberate. The chandelier lights caught the droplets sliding off Danielle's jawline. She blinked once, slowly. Her lips curved, almost into a smile, the kind that didn't forgive, only remembered. To her right, a man in a tuxedo tried to diffuse the tension. "Emily, maybe sit down," but she cut him off, voice high and shaking. "No, she's not supposed to be here. This dinner is for Meridian investors, not for whoever she is." Danielle reached for the napkin beside her plate. The fabric was crisp, starched, pure white, now streaked with gold. She dabbed her chin gently, her eyes never leaving Emily's. "Are you finished?" she asked, calm, almost kind. Emily's jaw tightened. "You people think money can buy manners. Guess not." Gasps rippled across the table. One woman set down her fork. Another reached discreetly for her phone. Danielle breathed in, steady, measured. She'd seen this before at 23, at 31, at 40. The setting changed. The tone didn't. The same disbelief that someone like her could own the room she walked into. At the far end of the hall, the MC hesitated on stage, unsure whether to continue or intervene. No one moved. No one dared. And in that vacuum of silence, Danielle's voice finally broke the air, quiet, deliberate. "That's one way to make an entrance." A nervous laugh flickered from somewhere in the crowd, quickly swallowed by the weight of what had just happened. Emily crossed her arms. "Security will handle it, and we fangs her wine." She turned, waving to a guard by the door. But the man hesitated, glancing between them, the drenched woman sitting like marble and the trembling socialite still clutching an empty bottle. Danielle straightened her posture. The wine had left a faint shimmer across her neckline, like armor under the chandelier glow. Every camera lens in the room seemed to tilt toward her. Someone whispered, "Who is she?" Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Danielle, because in the next few minutes, this quiet woman, the one everyone just tried to erase, will remind the entire Stonewell family exactly who keeps their empire alive. And it won't be pretty. The ballroom didn't recover. Even the string quartet missed a note before falling silent. All that money in the room, and suddenly, nobody knew what grace looked like. Danielle sat there still, centered, unshaken. The wine had dried along her collarbone like a quiet badge of survival. Across from her, Emily tried to laugh, but it came out brittle, like glass cracking. "I said leave," Emily snapped again, softer this time, unsure if she still had control. The guard shifted his stance, but didn't touch Danielle. He was waiting for someone, anyone, to tell him what to do. From another table, a woman in pearls whispered, "Who invited her?" A man answered under his breath, "Probably one of those diversity guests." They thought they were whispering. They weren't. Danielle folded her napkin slowly, deliberately. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, but it traveled farther than Emily's shouting ever could. "Don't mistake silence for weakness," she said. "It's just me choosing the higher ground." That line hung in the air, heavy and perfect. Even the cameras on the far end of the hall seemed to turn toward her, drawn by gravity. Emily scoffed. "Spare us the quotes. You're sitting at a private table for Meridian donors." Danielle's eyebrow lifted, subtle, amused. Is that so? A man in a tuxedo board member, mid-50 seconds, stepped forward, trying to contain the fallout. Ladies, please, he said, his tone managerial. The kind that sounds polite but means be quiet so the rich can breathe. He gestured toward a waiter. Get her a towel and maybe escort her outside. The waiter froze, unsure who her referred to. Then a voice came from somewhere near the media section. Wait, she's on the main list. Everyone turned. A young event coordinator held up her tablet. The guest log, glowing bright. Danielle Rhodes. Confirmed. Executive tier. Emily frowned. Executive tier of what? The coordinator swallowed, voice trembling. Meridian Group. Meridian Group, the table murmured. Someone coughed. Emily blinked. Never heard of it. Danielle's lips curved, just barely. Maybe you should have. The coordinator's voice gained strength now, sensing the shift. She's not a guest. She's a partner sponsor. The man in the tuxedo went pale. That's impossible. Stonewell Industries, my company, is hosting this event. Danielle leaned back slightly, eyes calm, almost compassionate. Then I suppose we're co-hosts tonight. The crowd stirred again. Low hums. Quiet disbelief. 100 unspoken apologies no one dared to say out loud. Emily's hand twitched, still holding the empty bottle. Her perfect smile fractured. You're bluffing. Danielle looked at her steady, piercing, unbothered. People who think I need to bluff usually don't know who they've just insulted. At that, the MC tried to restart the music, desperate to reset the mood. But the room had already chosen sides, even if no one said it aloud, half watching in shame, half in awe. From the far side of the hall, a young journalist whispered into her mic. This just became the story of the night. Danielle exhaled, slow and calm. The storm hadn't passed, it was only learning her name. And somewhere backstage, her assistant Evelyn's phone lit up. Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. But the board members did. Danielle didn't need to look at her phone. She knew Evelyn never hesitated. She reached for the glass of water beside her plate, not to drink, but to steady the weight of silence pressing on her. Then, softly, I'll stay right here. Emily blinked. Excuse me? Danielle looked up. I was invited to this table, remember? A hush rolled through the room. The guard, unsure now whom to protect, took a careful step back. The MC on stage whispered to his crew, Cut the feed, don't record this. But the camera lights stayed red. Someone had locked the stream. At the far end, 2 Stonewell executives whispered urgently, Get her out before this becomes a scene. And that sea of disasang in matter are in write down, in Leicester, unless CO and a C2 saying. It already is. Danielle's chair creaked slightly as she leaned forward. Do you know what I do for a living, Miss Stonewell? Emily crossed her arms. Clearly not PR. The room chuckled weakly, nervous. Danielle smiled not at the insult, but at the predictability of it. I build systems, she said evenly. Ones that record, verify, and remember. Emily frowned. Meaning? Danielle gestured toward the massive screen behind her. Meaning you might want to choose your next words carefully? They tend to outlive the moment. A flicker on the monitors, live feeds from the event's security cameras, suddenly looping then freezing on one image. The exact moment Emily spilled the wine, a gasp spread across the hall. Emily turned, horrified. What is this? Danielle didn't move. You said I didn't belong. Now everyone can decide for themselves. A few guests rose quietly, excusing themselves, ashamed to be part of the spectacle. The man in the tuxedo, now sweating, muttered, This is going too far. Danielle looked at him. No. This is what happens when silence protects the wrong people. The young journalist near the stage whispered to her camera, She's not just powerful, she came prepared. Emily's brother, Thomas Stonewell, entered through the side door, clearly summoned. Emily, what the hell is happening? Emily pointed across the table. She's hijacking our event. Thomas turned to Danielle. Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but you will? She interrupted gently. She reached for her phone, tapped once. A corporate ringtone echoed through the speakers, followed by a crisp female voice. Miss Rhodes, the board confirms your attendance. All Stonewell contracts are under review, effective immediately. The ballroom froze again. Thomas's face went pale. Under review? For what reason? Danielle finally stood. For negligence and arrogance, dressed as entitlement, the audience barely breathed. Phones were up now, recording, but Danielle didn't flinch. She simply placed her glass down and said, "Tonight wasn't about the deal. It was a test of character. And you failed before dessert." The crowd erupted, not in cheers, not yet, but in the low electric murmur that always precedes a storm. Emily stumbled back, her chair scraping against the marble. Danielle adjusted her cuffs, eyes never leaving the siblings. "Don't worry," she said calmly. "You'll still have your family name tomorrow." She paused. "You just won't have the empire that came with it." The band didn't play again that night, but every phone in that room would, and by morning, the world would know exactly who Danielle Rhodes was and how she chose to remind them. By midnight, the gala wasn't a gala anymore. It was a broadcast. 1,000 phones lit the ballroom like a constellation of judgment. Every shimmer of crystal, every whispered word now belonged to the internet. Danielle Rhodes hadn't moved far from her chair. The seat that hours ago was a symbol of exclusion had become a stage. She rested her hands lightly on the table, her calm, almost defiant. Emily Stonewell stood a few feet away, trembling not from the chill, but from the realization that power wasn't on her side anymore. Behind her, Thomas whispered into his phone, his voice cracking, "Shut it down. All of it. Shut down the feed." But no one on his team answered. Meridian's system had overridden the entire events network minutes ago. Across the hall, reporters' alerts pinged in unison. CEO humiliated at Stonewall Gala. Wine, privilege, and $1 billion mistake. The story had already escaped the room. Evelyn stood near the back, headset on, eyes sharp. She spoke quietly into her mic. "Live stream analytics rising U.S. U.K. South Africa. Protocol 9, confirmed viral threshold." Danielle didn't need to look back. She could feel it, the weight of awareness, spreading faster than shame. The MC attempted one last save. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice trembling. "Please, let's focus on the cause. Tonight is for charity." Danielle turned her head slightly, voice soft but deadly clear. "Charity starts with decency. You can't fund one while denying the other." That line detonated the room. Applause broke from a corner table, hesitant at first, then growing. A woman in a silver gown clapped once, firmly. Then another joined. Within seconds, the sound filled the air like a verdict. Emily's face collapsed under the noise. "You planned this," she hissed. Danielle rose from her seat, graceful and unhurried. "No," she said. "You did." Thomas stepped forward, face flushed. "You can't cancel a deal over an accident." Danielle turned toward him, the chandelier light carving sharp edges in her expression. "When a billion-dollar partnership depends on your sister's temper, it was never stable to begin with." He opened his mouth to argue but stopped. The screens behind her had changed again. Now they displayed email threads, signatures, partnership clauses, Stonewall Industries' upcoming merger announcements, all bearing the watermark. Meridian Group, under ethics review. Gasps, murmurs, panic. The crowd wasn't just watching drama. They were witnessing the dismantling of an empire in real time. A security guard approached Danielle cautiously. "Ma'am, do you need an escort to your car?" She smiled faintly. "No, I think they do." The cameras followed her as she walked toward the exit. Each step was measured, elegant, the kind of poise that doesn't come from arrogance, but from survival. Guests parted like water, whispering as she passed. A young woman, an intern by the catering station, called out, almost trembling, "Miss Rhodes?" Danielle turned. The girl's eyes were glassy. "Thank you for not letting it slide." Danielle nodded once. "Never let them decide your worth in public." As she reached the glass doors, she paused, glancing back at the chaos she left behind. Emily now sat in her own chair, pale, mascara streaked. Thomas was still arguing with someone on the phone, waving contracts like relics. The MC stood frozen, mic in hand, voice gone. Danielle whispered, just loud enough for the nearest cameras to catch. Tonight, the world didn't see a scandal. It saw a standard. Then she walked into the night. No bodyguards, no entourage. Just the sound of her heels cutting through the marble floor, like punctuation to an ending no one expected. By dawn, the video would pass 10 million views. But for Danielle Rhodes, the view that mattered most was the look on every face that realized she never raised her voice, she only raised the bar. By 6 a.m., New York was awake and buzzing. Screens glowed in taxis, cafes, and conference rooms. The headline was everywhere. Stonewall Gala scandal, Black CEO walks out, company collapses overnight. Danielle Rhodes sat by her window, coffee untouched, the skyline still gray from dawn. Her phone hadn't stopped vibrating since 3 a.m., but she hadn't picked it up once. The city moved below her, chaotic, judgmental, alive, while she stayed perfectly still. Evelyn entered quietly, tablet in hand. The board meeting's at 9. Press wants a statement. Danielle nodded without looking up. Let the truth speak first, she said. Evelyn hesitated. You haven't checked your messages? Danielle finally turned. Why? Did they find new excuses? On the screen, hundreds of notifications, resignation letters, public apologies, brand withdrawal statements. One from Thomas Stonewall himself. We regret the misunderstanding. Danielle exhaled slowly. Misunderstanding. She repeated the word like it was poison. That's how they sanitize racism. Evelyn sat across from her. It's not just them. Employees are posting about it. Someone leaked the internal email where Emily called you. I know, Danielle interrupted softly. And I don't need revenge. I just need the truth to finish its job. She stood, walking toward the window. The light caught the faint stain still visible on her white dress. She hadn't changed it. People think control means shouting louder, she murmured. But control is choosing silence until the world has to fill it with your name. Across the city, Stonewall Industries headquarters looked like a toppled monument. Reporters outside, investors calling, staff leaving with boxes. Emily hadn't been seen since midnight. Thomas had been forced off the board by dawn. Meanwhile, Meridian Group's valuation had surged by 20%. Danielle hadn't announced a word. Power didn't need announcements. Her phone rang again. This time, she answered. A voice came through, calm, measured, familiar. Danielle, it's Senator Knox. I watched the footage. You handled it better than any PR team could have scripted. Danielle smiled faintly. That's because it wasn't a script. It was my life again. The senator paused. Would you consider speaking at the Equality Summit next month? Danielle's eyes softened. If they're ready to listen. When the call ended, she looked at Evelyn. Draft a message for our staff, she said. Something short. Evelyn typed as Danielle dictated. We build our empire on integrity. When others spill ignorance, we don't retaliate, we rise. Effective immediately, Meridian will allocate $10 million toward diversity and leadership grants for underrepresented entrepreneurs. Evelyn looked up. That's beautiful. Danielle shook her head. It's overdue. She finally lifted her coffee, taking a sip that had gone cold hours ago. The bitterness matched the moment, sharp, grounding, necessary. Outside, the first rays of sun lit the city gold. Danielle watched people crossing the street below, unaware they were walking through the first morning of a new balance. Her phone buzzed once more, a text from an unknown number. It read, You destroyed everything we built. She stared at it for a moment, then typed back, No, I just reminded you who built it. She set the phone down, exhaling as the city roared to life again. Justice didn't always arrive with sirens. Sometimes it came as quiet correction at sunrise. And as the light spilled into her office, the world finally understood. Danielle Rhodes didn't just survive the storm, she was the reason it ended. By Friday morning, 3 days after the gala, every network wanted her. Morning talk shows, business panels, podcasts, even late-night hosts were chasing the same headline. The CEO who didn't shout. Danielle Rhodes agreed to one interview. Only one. A live segment on Global View, the biggest business network in the country. No publicist. No rehearsed talking points. Just truth. The studio lights were white hot, but Danielle looked effortless, charcoal suit. No jewelry. Posture still as marble. The host, Allison Grant, smiled for the camera, all charm and nerves. Miss Rhodes, thank you for joining us. You've become a symbol of restraint and power overnight. How does that feel? Danielle paused before answering. Unnecessary, she said simply. No one should have to prove their dignity to earn it. The host blinked, thrown off her rhythm. But you understand. Your calmness, your silence, it's what made this story viral. Danielle's gaze didn't waver. It shouldn't take a viral video for people to recognize racism when it's happening in front of them. Allison hesitated, then leaned forward. Emily Stonewall's family released a statement this morning. They claim it was an accident. They say she tripped. Danielle smiled faintly. Then I hope next time she trips over her prejudice first. The crew stifled laughter. Someone behind the camera whispered, "That's going to trend." But Danielle wasn't trying to trend. She was trying to end something. Allison tried again. "Do you plan to press charges?" "No," Danielle said, calm as ice. "The world already did." Juan is Redding. There was a long pause, that kind of silence television producers dread but audiences lean into. Danielle continued, her tone softer now. "You see, humiliation has a short lifespan, but how we respond to it decides what lives after." She looked directly into the camera. "For years, I've walked into rooms where people assumed I was the assistant, the stylist, the guest. And every time, I had a choice to fight or to lead. This time, I chose both." The host found her breath again. "And what would you say to young black women watching this?" Danielle's eyes glistened, not from emotion, but conviction. "Don't let them confuse your calm with permission. Silence is not surrender. It's strategy." Behind the glass, producers were nodding. The phones in the control room lit up. Comments flooded in across social media. "She's teaching a masterclass in grace. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just looks you in the eye." Allison ended the segment on cue. "Miss Rhodes, thank you for your time." Danielle smiled once more. Genuine this time. "Thank you for listening." When the cameras cut, the studio stayed quiet. Even the crew didn't move for a moment. Then applause, soft, respectful, unprompted. Outside the studio, reporters waited with microphones. Danielle stepped into the sunlight, the city reflecting on every window pane. Evelyn was already by the car, phone in hand. "It's everywhere," she said. 30 million views in 3 hours. Hashtags in 10 languages. Danielle nodded. "Good. Maybe now they'll remember the message, not just the scandal." Evelyn smiled. "What should I tell the networks calling for follow-ups?" "Tell them to watch the interview again. Everything that needed to be said was said." She looked up at the skyline, tall, unapologetic, bright. "Let's get back to work," she said quietly. The world saw a viral story. Danielle saw unfinished business. Because the real victory isn't being seen, it's staying seen for the right reason. 3 days after the interview, Danielle's office felt different. Not quieter, cleaner. The kind of calm that follows a storm that washed away what didn't belong. Her assistant, Evelyn, walked in with a stack of envelopes and an expression that hovered between pride and disbelief. "Guess what showed up this morning?" she said. Danielle glanced up. "More apologies?" "Apologies," Evelyn replied. "And invitations." She placed them on the desk, one by one. Forbes Women of Power Summit, Global Business Forum, Stonewall Foundation Gala, Rebuilding Bridges. Danielle raised an eyebrow at the last one. "Rebuilding bridges?" she murmured. "They burned them themselves." Evelyn smirked. "They're hoping you'll bring the water." Danielle leaned back in her chair. The morning light poured through the window, cutting across the minimalist decor, white marble, black steel, no distractions. She traced her finger over the embossed Stonewall logo. "Desperation always comes in gold ink," she said quietly. Evelyn crossed her arms. "What do you want to do?" Danielle didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood, walked to the window, and watched the skyline she'd once fought to enter. "There's something poetic about being invited into rooms that once tried to throw you out," she said. Evelyn tilted her head. "Poetic or pointless?" Danielle smiled faintly. "That depends on who does the talking when I walk in." Her phone buzzed, another unknown number. She let it ring. Then again. Finally she answered. A familiar voice filled the line. "Danielle, it's Thomas Stonewall." The name dropped like a coin in a still pond. "I'm calling to extend a personal invitation," he continued. "We're hosting a reconciliation dinner next week. My sister won't be attending, but our father would like to meet." Privately, Danielle didn't respond. She let the silence do the work. Thomas pressed on, nervous. "We've taken heavy losses. Our family's reputation was built on behavior like hers," Danielle finished for him. He exhaled sharply. "We're trying to correct that." "You've made your point." "No," she said calmly. "The world made my point. I just stopped pretending not to see it." He hesitated. "Please, come to the dinner. Maybe we can discuss how to move forward." Danielle's voice softened, measured. "Moving forward doesn't mean returning to where we started." Then she hung up. Evelyn was watching her. "You're not going, are you?" Danielle smiled. "Oh, I am. But not for dinner." Later that night, in the quiet of her penthouse, she opened the invitation again. its gold edges gleaming against the dark glass table. She slid it beneath a folder labeled Meridian Foundation Initiative, Social Reinvestment Project. Her reflection looked back at her from the glass, poised, relentless, unafraid. She whispered to herself, "They wanted a meeting. Let's give them one worth remembering." Outside, thunder rolled over Manhattan, a low promise in the distance. It wasn't storm season, but maybe storms didn't check calendars. Danielle closed her planner, switched off the light, and let the city's glow take over. She wasn't planning revenge. She was planning reform. And when people like the Stonewells finally asked how she did it, she'd tell them the same thing she told herself the night of the gala. Power isn't taken, it's revealed. The world thought her story was over. But Danielle Rhodes was just beginning to write the sequel in boardrooms that never expected her name on the door. The Stonewell mansion glowed like apology disguised as elegance. Valets lined the driveway, photographers kept their distance, and the press called it a private reconciliation. Danielle arrived alone. No entourage, no cameras, just presence, the kind that didn't need introduction. Inside, Thomas Stonewell waited beside his father, Richard the patriarch, white hair, silver cane, eyes sharp with calculation. He extended a hand. "Miss Rhodes, thank you for coming. I appreciate your composure." Danielle smiled politely. It's easy to stay composed when you're not pretending. They dined in a quiet room with a table too long for 3 people. Polished silver, untouched wine. Thomas spoke first. "We've lost nearly a third of our market value, but this doesn't have to destroy us. We could rebuild together." Danielle set her fork down gently. "You mean, use me to rebuild your credibility?" Richard leaned forward. "I'm offering partnership, not pity." She met his gaze, calm but razor sharp. "Partnership starts with accountability." "You haven't even said her name." Silence. The chandelier buzzed faintly above them. Richard sighed. "Emily made a mistake." Danielle's tone stayed even. "Mistakes spill coffee." She spilled contempt. Thomas looked down. The weight of her words hung like lead. Danielle reached into her purse, placed a folder on the table. "This is the new Meridian Initiative, a leadership program for young women of color. Fully funded. I want Stonewell to contribute." Richard blinked. "You're asking for money?" "No," Danielle replied. "I'm offering redemption. Your company's name on that list says more than any statement ever could." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once, almost in surrender. Thomas whispered, "You're not just rebuilding us, are you?" "Any Maine." Danielle stood, gathering her things. "No," she said softly. "I'm rebuilding the standard." As she turned to leave, Richard called after her. "Miss Rhodes, why help us at all?" She paused at the door, her silhouette framed in the chandelier light. "Because the system won't change if we only burn it. Sometimes you have to rebuild it in your own image." Then she left quiet, composed, unstoppable. Outside, the night air was cool. Somewhere behind her, the old world began to bend. By sunrise, the city had already chosen its headline. Meridian and Stonewell joined forces for diversity initiative. But the fine print told a sharper story. Danielle Rhodes would chair the board. Stonewell's logo would appear under Meridian's name for the first time in 60 years. At the press conference, cameras crowded the lobby of Meridian Tower, not a hotel, not a ballroom, but neutral ground rebuilt in truth. Danielle walked in, dressed in soft gray, confident but measured, her calm commanding more than any spotlight could. Richard Stonewell stood beside her, face pale beneath the lights. When it was his turn to speak, his voice faltered. "We are here to acknowledge past mistakes," he began. Danielle's gaze didn't waver. He swallowed hard. "And to commit to something better." Then it was her turn. She approached the podium, looked out at the hundreds of lenses waiting to capture her next sentence. "Change," she said, "isn't about punishment, it's about correction." Flashes erupted. The room fell quiet again. Too many people think humility is weakness. But sometimes the strongest thing you can do is make those who failed you sit at the table and watch how it's done right. Behind her, the new project's banner unfurled, the Meridian Fellowship for Equity and Leadership. Dozens of names were printed across it. Students, small business owners, young black women ready to rise. Evelyn watched from the wings, proud but teary. A journalist asked loudly, "Miss Rhodes, do you forgive the Stonewell family?" Danielle smiled, soft but unshaken. "I don't carry grudges," she said. They're too heavy to take where I'm going. The crowd murmured approval, not applause, not noise, just respect. When the press conference ended, Danielle lingered by the podium for a moment, her hand resting lightly on the wood. It wasn't triumph, she felt, it was closure. She whispered to Evelyn, "You see, we didn't burn the bridge. We built a better one over the ashes." Outside, a small girl held up a sign reading, "Thank you, Miss Rhodes," and said in Chaktigdot. For the first time in days, Danielle allowed herself to smile, not as a CEO, but as proof that justice, when done right, becomes inheritance. It had been 31 days since the gala, and the world had moved on. But Danielle Rhodes hadn't. She was still moving forward, precise, relentless. Meridian Tower now looked different. The once sterile lobby buzzed with new energy. Interns from the fellowship program, scholarship recipients holding laptops, and mentors greeting them with the kind of pride that can't be faked. A wall-size photo installation showed a simple caption. "Where you were underestimated, start there. It is haven side once as the crowd was a longal Danielle stepped out of the elevator that morning to applause not from executives, but from the fellowship's first graduating class. 20 women, all under 30, all wearing the same quiet confidence she once had to learn the hard way. Evelyn stood beside her, whispering, "You did it. They're calling it the Rhodes Standard." Danielle smiled. "Let's hope it means something beyond my name." Later that day, she hosted a private luncheon on the top floor. No media, no press, just her team and the new fellows. The skyline glittered behind her as she spoke. "People will tell you you're lucky to be here," she began. "But luck doesn't look like sleepless nights and constant doubt. That's not luck, that's endurance disguised as grace." The women nodded, some smiling, some blinking back tears. She continued, "They'll underestimate you. Let them. It gives them less room to see you coming." The room broke into laughter, warm, real, defiant. Danielle raised her glass. To every woman told she didn't belong and stayed anyway. When the toast ended, she walked toward the balcony alone, taking in the hum of the city. Below, New York looked smaller now, not because it had shrunk, but because she finally stood tall enough to see its full shape. Evelyn joined her quietly. "You know Stonewall's been sending updates? Their diversity board's restructuring. Their CEO resigned yesterday." Danielle didn't turn. "Good. Systems change when comfort leaves the room." Evelyn smiled. "You could run for office one day, you know." Danielle laughed softly. "I'm allergic to politics. I prefer results." The wind caught her hair as she looked toward the horizon. "So what's next?" Evelyn asked. Danielle exhaled. "We scale. Not the company, the message." She turned, expression serious now. "I want this fellowship in every major city. Lagos, London, Sao Paulo. We're not just teaching leadership, we're rewriting access." Evelyn's eyes widened. "That's global." Danielle nodded. "So is injustice. Balance it. And sin mine in minus sorry was, implies, with a ballot." The elevator chimed behind them, and a security officer stepped out, holding a single envelope. "Miss Rhodes, delivery from the United Nations." She opened it, an embossed invitation. "Keynote speaker, Global Equity Forum, Geneva." Evelyn grinned. They finally caught up. Danielle folded the letter neatly, a small smile forming. "No," she said. They finally listened. As the sun lowered over the skyline, the city reflected gold, the same color as the wine once poured on her, now reframed as light. She looked out across the city she had once entered through doubt and left stamped with her standard. "Funny," she murmured. "They called it a scandal. But all I did was sit still long enough for the truth to stand up." Evelyn whispered, "You changed everything." Danielle smiled, eyes on the horizon. "No, I reminded them what everything should look like." And when night fell, the lights of Meridian Tower formed 3 words visible across the city skyline. Dignity is power. 2 months later, the SEC report hit the news. Stonewall Industries had been found guilty of multiple ethics violations, not from Danielle's doing, but from their own neglected trails. Every document, every cover-up, every whispered excuse finally surfaced. Thomas Stonewall resigned publicly. Emily remained unseen, her family releasing one final statement about reflection and personal growth. No one bought it. Danielle watched the coverage from her office window, expression unreadable. Evelyn turned from the screen. "They're finished." Danielle shook her head. "No, they're accountable. There's a difference. Outside, reporters camped at the building entrance, waiting for a comment. Danielle stepped out briefly, her voice calm and clear. Power isn't about revenge, she said. It's about responsibility. When we rebuild a broken system, we don't erase people, we remove excuses. The microphones crowded closer, but she didn't linger. She gave them one last line before walking back inside. Justice doesn't need noise. It just needs memory. Inside, the lobby fell silent as she passed every employee standing a little straighter. The same silence that once humiliated her had become the one that honored her. And as the doors closed behind her, the world understood. Danielle Rhodes hadn't destroyed an empire, she'd redesigned what power looked like. 6 months later, Danielle stood on a stage in Geneva. The banner above her read, Global Equity Forum, Building Power Without Bias. Thousands of leaders watched, cameras streaming live to millions. She began without notes. People ask me how I handled it, she said, voice steady. The truth is, I didn't handle it. I answered it with patience, not anger, with evidence, not ego. The audience leaned in. She continued, You can't teach respect through punishment. You teach it by example. And when the world finally sees you as equal, it's not because you shouted, it's because you stayed. Evelyn watched from backstage, tears threatening. Every word felt like a quiet revolution, disguised as grace. Danielle paused, letting the silence breathe. Then, the final line soft, measured, unforgettable. I don't need to remind the world who I am anymore, because the standard I set now speaks for itself. There was not many est. Applause rose, slow and rising like a tide. Reporters stood, delegates clapped, cameras flashed. And as she stepped down from the podium, she caught her reflection in the glass wall. The same woman, once drenched in wine, now bathed in light. Outside, banners fluttered in the Geneva wind. Dignity is power. The story that began in humiliation had ended in legacy. Danielle Rhodes didn't rewrite justice. She embodied it.